Hello and welcome to Let's Talk, and we're back in Westminster where the night before we did this interview there was a debate in the House of Commons about the change in the regulations concerning how long people with B&O passports are supposed to wait before they get their citizenship. And one of the members of Parliament who's been most active on these B&O questions has been the Member of Parliament, James Naish, and we went to see him in his office, which is just over there. So can I just ask you first of all, I mean, you have been notably interested in Hong Kong affairs. Well, why is that so?
So I guess my experience, I was the leader of the council in North Nottinghamshire, a council called Bassetlaw, which covered about 120,000 people. And it must have been 2021, 2022, we were very conscious that there was an influx of people from Hong Kong. And so I think in that moment there, we realised there was a real need to both welcome this new community and make it feel like this was home, but also support it in making the transition into building lives in a brand new country. And started to hear in those moments how some people were starting to find a number of areas quite tricky around qualifications and other matters. And so it was from there really that I was conscious that this new community was emerging. And of course it wasn't just in North Nottinghamshire, it was across the whole of Nottinghamshire. So I'm now the Member of Parliament for Rushcliffe, which is the most southern part of Nottingham. But there are over 2,000 Hong Kongers there. And there are other parts in Nottinghamshire where there are even more. And so I think coming to Parliament, what I realised was there's a much broader issue really, and a community that needs support.
Well, let's talk about the big broader issue that is troubling Hong Kongers at the moment. In fact, I think you were the first person to raise the changes to the indefinite right to remain law. Where do you think we are with that? I mean, it hasn't been enacted yet. There was a debate which you participated in.
Yeah.
Where does that leave things?
So the debate last night was really positive, I think. There were over 50 MPs that contributed. I think there were 37 Labour MPs. And of course that is significant because Labour right now is the party of government, and so ministers have got their ear to their backbenchers and want to know what they're thinking on key issues. So I was really pleased with the turnout last night. I think the room spoke pretty unanimously about wanting to see a kind of special route for B&Os and to treat them separately. And
I think we should clarify that if this law change goes through, it will apply to everybody who's on a path to citizenship.
Yeah, and it will move that from 5 years out to 10 years. And of course, we're at exactly that point where for a lot of people that came here in 2021, 2022, they're on the cusp of starting to make the relevant applications. So I think the Minister heard very clearly last night that there was cross-party support for treating Hong Kongers differently, to honour the promises that were originally made when they came and started to build their lives here in the UK. I want to keep standing with Hong Kong. I want to keep our promise to Hong Kongers. I want to keep the 5-year route. That is how we honour our word. We support a thriving community that has so much to offer to our nation, and it's a way that we can show the world that when Britain gives its word, it will keep it. And what was interesting to me was that there were a whole range of arguments made. Some of that was about existing community contribution, some of it was about the moral imperative, some of it was about the economic argument to say we've got people here who aren't fully able to contribute to the UK despite the fact that they've been home here for 3, 4, 5 years. So I think there was a lot to be hopeful for from that debate. Where we are is that the government is committed to consultation, which I think was always part of their plan around the immigration white paper, so that will be taking place over the coming months. I did push the Minister to say you must recognise that for many the clock is ticking here and there are life decisions that are being put on hold as a result of the consultation that you've got planned.
I don't think you got an answer to that, did you?
There was a recognition, I think, that there's a lot of people that are anxious and there's a lot of people maybe waiting to study or travel or do other things which they're unable to do without being able to apply and receive citizenship. So it's I think it was very clear for me, and I hope for the Minister, that this is going to be an issue that parliamentarians are very passionate about, and we're going to want to see movement in the coming weeks. And ideally for me, it would be a case of the government specifically carving out the Hong Kongers and the commitments that we've made in the past, and recognising that that can be talked about and focused on separately to the wider immigration debate which is taking place. And I think one of the things I find interesting in my constituency is there are certain people who are very anti-immigration, but they might be very pro their Hong Kong neighbours.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that.
So I've really noticed that this group of people is seen and thought of very differently, and that's obviously very welcomed, but we need to make sure that the government recognises that too.
In one word, how would you describe a Hong Konger?
Reliable.
What's the best thing Hong Kongers have added to local life here?
They've played a really active role in my local community through volunteering, through churches, and just generally made Rushcliffe a good place to be living.
Be honest. What's one Hong Kong habit you secretly struggle with?
Oh, a Hong Kong habit I struggle with. I've not really picked up any. I don't think I've really picked up on anything significant. Obviously, linguistically, there can sometimes be challenges, but as long as everybody's patient, I think we can always get to a good conclusion.
Name one British custom every Hong Konger should know, and why?
Shaking hands. We do a lot of shaking hands as a British country.
In one word, what should Britain stand for in immigration?
In one word, morals.
You know, talking to Hong Kongers who are here, the thing which comes up most is this sense of betrayal. You know, they came under an understanding, they stayed here for 5 years, plus one, they'd get citizenship.
Yeah.
They're here, and suddenly the rule has changed. Is that the crucial point, that the rules have changed in the middle of the game?
I think it's one of the key points. I think the idea of the goalposts moving was talked about by several MPs last night, and I think they're right to articulate that. Rules do change. You know, I think we all would recognise that. I can think of some instances, say with farmers at the moment, where the rules around inheritance tax have changed and they've been planning or expecting to operate under a certain system, and now that has shifted.
But I think it doesn't work retrospectively. This is working retrospectively.
So I think we definitely have an issue here where I think we need to honour those who are here and make sure that the basis on which they came to the UK is reflected in legislation, and that we honour that. There's certainly questions about what would it mean for Britain's standing if we were to shift on a commitment that we have made, a very significant commitment that hundreds of thousands of people responded to and recognised and really valued. And I think it would leave a real stain really on our reputation internationally if we weren't to follow through with those original commitments.
And just to be rather cynical, but a lot of people would say, you know, what's the point of these debates? You can't vote. I mean, you can't. They're merely an airing of opinion.
Yeah, they are an airing of opinion, but I think what we're trying to do is to communicate as parliamentarians that we see an issue and we think it's important. And so yesterday, not only was there hundreds of thousands of people that had signed a petition, but then there was dozens of MPs, over 50 in total, that showed up to a debate voluntarily, and on a Monday as well, and especially with the tube strikes and everything yesterday, quite tricky to get in. So I think it shows a sentiment and it means that hopefully ministers now will be thinking very, very carefully about the decision that they make, because they're potentially going to face the ire of their backbenchers, which they don't normally want to do if they can avoid it.
Well, the other thing that's changed is, of course, that because of the government reshuffle in the last few days, there's a new Home Secretary. She seems to be taking quite a hard line on immigration issues. How do you think that will impact this particular point, the change of the person at the top?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, I'd really like to try and carve the Hong Kong issue out from some of the others. I think Ukrainians are the same. When I speak to people on the doorstep, which I obviously have to do quite regularly in my role as a Member of Parliament, they do see different types of immigration. You know, students are a separate category. Those that are coming to work in the health service are a different category. And so I think it's very easy to band all of this together. And actually, I think the debate is easier and it's better managed by breaking it into the constituent parts. And so that's where I would like to push. And I'm sure that the Minister last night, Alex Norris, who isn't too far away from me as a Nottinghamshire MP, I'm sure that he heard very loudly and clearly what members of Parliament thought, and will be taking that back to his department with him today to say, right, well, we've got a potential issue here if we don't get this one right.
I mean, it's interesting, you said this earlier and you've just mentioned it again. There seems to be a slightly different attitude towards Hong Kongers compared with other immigrants. Why do you think that is so?
I think it's that historic commitment, that relationship that we've had. It's to do with the fact that we made a commitment, and I think a lot of people would like to think that as a country we will honour that. I think there is general concern about Beijing and some of the sort of power grabs and some of the transnational repression that we're seeing. So I think for a lot of people, they're able to distinguish this issue from other broader concerns about immigration. And I certainly see that in things like comments on social media when a lot of comments come obviously from the impacted communities, but my constituents will contribute as well. And as I said earlier, I do see people who I know have got a very strong view on immigration, but they are saying, thank you very much for standing up for my neighbours and the people that I've grown to know. And of course, the Hong Kongers have done a good job of integrating themselves, whether that's through local churches or through community groups or volunteering. And so increasingly, they are friends and neighbours as opposed to a group of people that have come across and are living in accommodation and with all the associated politics around that. I think it's a very different category, and for my constituents anyway, it seems that they recognise that and therefore support me in making some of the noise that I'm trying to make on Hong Kong's behalf.
And it's also noticeable on the political front that issues concerning China and Hong Kong seem to be not very partisan. I mean, the Tories and the Labour Party seem to be pretty much in line. Yeah. Is that correct?
I would say so, and certainly the Conservative government brought in this scheme initially with the support of the Labour Party when it was in opposition, and those positions have now reversed. But it seems very clear to me that the cross-party support is there.
And the other looming decision, which will have to be made, we were told, in fact, was going to be made next month, is that over the new Chinese mega embassy. Yeah. I know you've been a vocal opponent of that. Where do you think things stands with that now?
It was obviously a decision that Angela Rayner, as Secretary of State, was due to make. She will no longer be making that decision. So don't quite know, to be honest, where that will land in the coming weeks, but we obviously know a decision is imminent. And I'm sure, again, there will be a cross-party effort to make sure that any decision is scrutinised. And I personally hope that the decision is taken to reject the application.
I mean, it just seems to be in the case of China that this government is going out of its way to be accommodating. You've had visits from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, from the Foreign Secretary. Prime Minister himself is planning to go to China shortly. There's a very high level of making nice to China going on. Does that worry you?
I think, look, there's always going to be a degree of balance. China's a huge player economically and internationally as well. and obviously has seen its economy grow hugely over the past couple of decades. And so it doesn't surprise me that that level of dialogue is taking place. I think what's important to me is that the key issues, some of which we've already talked about, are being raised repeatedly and being raised in a forceful way to make sure that the British interests are being reflected. And it's not just about deals, it's not just about economics, it's about the broader issues and making sure that the UK continues to stand up for Hong Kongers, stand up for British values, stand up for international diplomacy.
And I just wonder, I mean, you've taken a very vocal position, particularly on Hong Kong. Do you think you'd be able to visit Hong Kong? Have you had any, or indeed, do you think you'd be able to visit China? I mean, we've seen one MP turned away at the airport already.
Yeah, I have thought about it, but look, I hope that doesn't happen. That I'm there to represent my constituents and to represent genuine concerns from people that have settled here in the UK. And I strongly believe that parliaments across the world should have the ability to raise anything that they deem fit. So really, it should be a message to the Chinese authorities to say, if we're not happy with that type of criticism, what should we be doing to make sure that it's not happening in such a prominent way? So I would hope that we would be responded to positively, as opposed to being told that we won't be able to go into X country at a particular point in time.
Well, that's a bravely optimistic position.
Well, if you're not optimistic in this game, then it's probably not the right game to be in.
Well, look, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Lovely to chat to you.
Thank you.